Okay, I wanted to give a quick introduction to parallelograms. So let's take and draw a parallelogram. Not bad freehand. Not bad freehand. Just do a little bit of a cleanup here. Okay, so here's a parallelogram. Now, what makes it a parallelogram? Well, it's a quadrilateral. So it's got four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. What it also has is it has that the opposite sides, these two sides here, are parallel. Okay, so to denote that they're parallel, you put a little arrow on them. Also, the other opposite sides are also parallel. You can't put one arrow because that would show that they're parallel to all three, and it's not. So these two are parallel to each other. Okay? So opposite sides are parallel. They're also congruent, which means they're equal. So these are congruent. Those sides are congruent. And these sides are congruent, which means they have equal lengths. Okay? We also know that the opposite angles are congruent. So if this is 100 degrees, then this must be 100 degrees. Okay, at the same time, if those are 100, we do know that this whole thing, that these opposite have to be equal to each other. So if they're equal to each other, in this whole thing, we already should know that all four angles of the quadrilateral add to 360. So if we do 360 minus 200, that's 160, divide by 2, that means that each of these are 80 degrees. So x's are 80 degrees. Let's go back here. So now I know that if these are 100 degrees, then these would be 80 degrees. Okay, notice how the consecutive angles, the angles in a row next to each other, they are add to 180 degrees. That will always be true in a parallelogram also. So 100 plus 80, 180, 180, 180, 180. Okay? So let's erase this for a second. We can also draw diagonals. And if we draw diagonals, let's use green. If I draw diagonals here, like so, these diagonals bisect each other. So write this down here. Diagonals bisect each other. So that means that these would be equal, and also those would be equal. Okay, so let's go back now, and I'm going to try to erase, hopefully not the whole thing. Oh, that worked well. Let's do that. So we have this parallelogram, and we'll say it has diagonals. Nope, that wasn't pretty. Let's try it again. Okay, and let's name these things. I need 5 vertice names here. Let's go. Let's go. F R, O, G, and S is in the middle. So that leads us to some ideas here. So for example, if this FR is 10, that means OG must be 10. Same token, let's call this 25, FG. RO must be 25. Okay, if you had FS is, say, 12, SO would have to be 12 because it bisects each other. So you have all this symmetry here. Let's call this 9, RS9. That means SG has to be 9. Again, more symmetry. That means RG, this whole thing, should be pretty obvious, I shouldn't draw it, would have to be 18 because it's 9 plus 9. We also have some ideas of angles here. Let's say RFG. Let's call this 70. So this whole thing here is 70. That means this whole thing over here is 70, which means that this whole angle on this side, FGO, has to be 110 because it has to add to 180, which means that this angle over here would have to be 110. Okay, but since it's a parallelogram, we can actually go to parallel transversals. So what I mean by that is, let's say that this is 37 degrees here. Okay, because these here are parallel. Oops, wrong ones. Let's go, these are parallel with a transversal going through it. That means this ROF has to be 37 degrees also. Okay, which means that if this is, say, 45 degrees, that over here has to be 45 degrees. Okay, and by the same token, we know that these add to, say, let's see, 82, 45. So this here's whole thing here, that's 82 degrees because it's 45 plus 37. So that means that this whole angle here has to be 98 degrees because it has to add to 180. And then if I throw a number in here, say 51 degrees, that means this has to be 47 degrees. This might not be to scale, which also means over here that this would have to be 51 degrees, and this would have to be 47 degrees. So there's a lot of symmetry in these triangles. Okay, in fact, we can even find these central angles here because these two, 45 and 51, that is 96. And this small triangle here has to add to 180. So 96, that would have to be an 84. So that has to be 84 degrees. Since these are vertical here, that has to be at 84 degrees also. Also, you might notice that these two triangles here and here are congruent. And because of supplementary angles, this has to be 96 degrees. And same here, 96 degrees. So there's a lot you can see just by getting information. When you're starting to work with like problems with parallelograms, they basically just give you pieces and you have to kind of chase everything around using the all those ideas and find other angles, other sides. All right.